All right, so we're continuing here with Bleeding Kansas led to popular sovereignty. I was saying something that I forgot. Popular sovereignty, which Stephen Douglas, Democrat from Illinois, says people should vote in Kansas and Nebraska as to whether or not they want slavery. This is what I was going to say before I had to end that part one. This voting of the idea of popular sovereignty is important because, and this is exactly how you're going to say this on the DBQ, right? If this is a document, this is important because by allowing people in Kansas and Nebraska to vote, this was an overturn. He essentially overturned the Missouri Compromise, and that was in 1821, also crafted by Henry Clay, which that 3630 parallel, anything north of the 3630 line all the way to the Pacific, Mexican territory at the time before we conquered it and gained the Mexican territory, would outlaw slavery north of it. Anything south of it would allow slavery. So this was a direct repeal of the Missouri Compromise. This is a big one, 1856 with Bleeding Kansas. Of course, with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, they go together. This is at the heart of the 1850s, the antebellum period, directly prior, right before the beginning of the Civil War. It's one of the main causes of the Civil War. It's one of the main, and by the way, before we go on, it's one of the main causes of the Civil War, but it stems from this Kansas-Nebraska Act is a cause of the Civil War, but it stems from Polk, right? And it stems from this expansionism, this democratic dream of expansion westward for slavery. All right, so this is all connected. This is how you're going to write the DBQ. All right, let's go to 1857. I'm going to go back to purple here. 1857 is the Dred Scott case. This is the U.S. Supreme Court's case that basically said black people were property. Dred Scott is a slave who's brought by his master into a northern territory, into a northern state, which is a free state. He claims for freedom. They say no. Basically, the gist of the case is blacks are considered property by the United States Supreme Court. Again, all very important because it's increasing sectionalism in the United States, and it's causing, here's a arrow here, a strict divide between the North and the South and their views on black people, an even bigger divide, a greater divide. All right, 1859 is right before 1860, the outbreak of the Civil War, the election of Abraham Lincoln. This is going to be John Brown, John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia, which is basically a armory, an armory for the North. And John Brown is going to raid it, try to get a revolt going. He had visions of Jesus telling him to go do this and free the slaves, just like Nate Turner did. This would ultimately fail. And this was a big thing with sectionalism because, just a fun side note with this, in the North, when John Brown was hung for his crime here, the northern churches actually tolled their bells. So when people die, the tolling of the bell is symbolic for in mourning of them, in remembrance of them. Northern churches will actually toll their bells for John Brown, and when the South hears about that, they get even more infuriated. Let's continue here. So 1860, we've got obviously Lincoln is elected, all right, in November. He's inaugurated in March 1861. However, between 1860 and 1861, you see that? Yeah. Between 1860 and 1861, there's this thing sweeping across the South called secession. I don't know how you spell it, but secessionist winter. And this is where several states will leave the Union and secede between Lincoln's election in November and that following spring in March, his inauguration on March 4th. Several states will leave, and then South Carolina will officially start the war after they've seceded. They fire on Fort Sumter. All right, now we're going to kind of get into the Civil War and what's going on during the Civil War here. In 1862, Yes, there's a lot of battles in the Civil War. Some are more important than others, in which I'm about to elaborate on that. In 1862, though, this is a video I did over the weekend. Republicans are doing something very interesting in Congress. Yeah, there's a war going on. Yeah, it's hard war, soft war. Lincoln's going through his generals. We have to win and save the Union, and then that'll change over time to a new birth of freedom by freeing the slaves. But in 1862, the Republicans, before all that, they passed the Homestead Act. Homestead Act encouraged migration to the West. And it told people that if you, incorporate the West, and if you go settle out there, such as farmers and yeomen, if you go out there, we will give you money for land. And we, as the government, will give you money for land, and then we'll help you farm that land. This was doubled down in the same year by things like the Morrill Land Grant. Act. That's also in 1862. What the Morrill Land Grant Act did is it incentivized people to move west because the United States government would also give them an education and create these colleges that if people would incorporate the West as homesteaders, and they would incorporate the government would incorporate the land, and then the United States government would educate people through the Morrill Land Grant Act in 1862. This Homestead Act in 1862 and the Morrill Land Grant Act, it was all intended on westward expansion. Civil War is already happening right now. Slavery is almost dead, so that's not its main intention. Its main intention is making America rich, expand her natural resources, to expand the amount of land she has, to lay down railroad track, and kind of transition America into an industrial capitalist economy. This would ultimately lead to the rise of the corporation, which America's first corporation was the railroad industry. How do you make this industry really rich and powerful? What do you have to do? Well, you need to lay more track, right? You got to get more trains going, more customers. How do you get more customers and trains going? By expanding westward, because we need more land. So this, in 1862, in the middle of the Civil War, is directly connected to the Gilded Age and America's second industrial revolution, because it's eventually, about 10 to 15 years later, not even, is going to give rise to America's first corporation, the railroad. Okay. All right, moving on here. I'm going to move the screen here. And can you see? Yes, there you go. Good. We're going to now continue with our dates. We're going to go to 1864. In 1864, we have the Sherman's March to the Sea. And we also have special, I don't know, it's not how you spell it, but whatever. Special Field Order number 15, which the slaves and gave the slaves land of former Confederates. Totally botched them. It gave the slaves land of Confederates in the South to farm. So Special Field Order number 15 gives, they called them Sherman's lands, right? They called them Sherman's lands. And these former slaves who used to work on that very field were now by General Sherman given, through Special Field Order number 15, given that land back to field and make a profit off of. He also marches from Atlanta, right, 300 miles, I think it was, from Atlanta to the coast. And it's a turn towards hard war now, right? We said in the Civil War, we said 1863, they turn towards hard war. Lincoln finally finds Ulysses S. Grant and General Sherman, and I forgot 1863 here. We have a victory at Gettysburg. This is also July 1863. A victory at Vicksburg. And Vicksburg, Mississippi was really important, that battle, because what that did is that split the South into two, right? The Union now control the Mississippi River. Okay, the Union now controls the Mississippi River. And it split, can you see that? It split the South in two. All right, is this, well, you guys can see. All right, the next thing as well. Hey, come on in, come on in, come on in.